Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, when snowflakes were falling from the sky like feathers, a beautiful queen sat by a window framed with black ebony, sewing. And as she sewed and looked up at the falling snow, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow. And because the red looked so lovely upon the white, she thought, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as this frame. And soon after, she bore a little daughter, as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony, and therefore she was called Snow White. The queen was the most beautiful woman in the whole land, and she was very proud of her beauty. She also had a mirror, and every morning she would stand before it and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would always answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." Then she knew for certain that no one in the world was more beautiful than she. But Snow White grew up, and when she was 7 years old, she was so beautiful that she even surpassed the queen in beauty. And when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror answered, "Queen, you are fair indeed, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." When the queen heard the mirror speak thus, she turned pale with envy, and from that hour she hated Snow White. Whenever she looked at her, and thought that because of her she was no longer the most beautiful in the world, her heart turned over in her breast. Then envy and pride grew so strong within her that they gave her no rest. She called a huntsman and said to him, "Take Snow White out into the forest to a remote place, kill her there, and as proof bring me back her lungs and liver, which I will cook with salt and eat." The huntsman took Snow White and led her out. But when he had drawn his knife and was about to stab her, she began to weep and begged so earnestly for her life, promising never to return but to run away into the forest. The huntsman took pity on her because she was so beautiful, and thought, "The wild animals will devour her soon enough anyway. I'm glad I do not have to kill her." And just then a young wild boar came running by, so he killed it, took out its lungs and liver, and brought them to the queen as proof. She cooked them with salt and ate them, thinking she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. But Snow White was all alone in the great forest, and she became so afraid that she began to run and run over the sharp stones and through the thorns the whole day. Finally, when the sun was about to set, she came to a little house. The house belonged to 7 dwarfs, but they were not at home. They had gone to the mine. Snow White went inside and found everything small, but neat and clean. There stood a little table with 7 little plates, beside it 7 little spoons, 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little cups. Against the wall stood 7 little beds side by side, all freshly made. Snow White was hungry and thirsty, so she ate a little vegetables and bread from each plate, drank a drop of wine from each little glass, and because she was so tired, she wanted to lie down to sleep. So she tried the 7 little beds one after another, but none was quite right until she came to the 7th, into which she lay and fell asleep. When it was night, the 7 dwarfs came home from their work and lit their 7 little candles. Then they saw that someone had been in their house. The first one said, "Who has been sitting on my little chair?" The second, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third, "Who has been taking some of my little bread?" The fourth, "Who has been eating some of my vegetables?" The fifth, "Who has been stabbing with my little fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my little knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking from my little cup?" Then the first one looked around and said, "Who has been stepping in my little bed?" The second, "Oh, someone has been lying in my bed too." And so they all went on until they came to the 7th. When he looked at his little bed, he found Snow White lying in it asleep. Then all the dwarfs came running and cried out in wonder, and they fetched their 7 little candles and looked at Snow White. "Oh heavens! Oh heavens!" they cried. "What a beautiful child!" They were very pleased with her, and did not wake her up but let her lie in the little bed. The 7th dwarf slept with his companions, an hour with each, and then the night was over. But the queen, believing she was once again the most beautiful in the land, went in the morning to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" Then the mirror answered again, "Queen, you're fair indeed, it's true, but Snow White beyond the mountains, with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you."